Hi, this is Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and it's time for Footloose Friday. So, what are we doing this time? Well, it's actually been a project we've done a couple of times. We explored it in March of 2023 with our Fat Quarter of the Month Club when we used this month's topic to couch or applique a cute little design on a doorstop. So yes, I said couching. And couching is the technique of actually sewing down heavier yarn. So instead of feeding the thicker thread through the needle or in the bobbin, you're doing it by laying down that fiber and stitching on top of it. And we're going to feature 2 feet this month. The first foot that we'll be using is foot number 25, and foot number 25 is a 5-groove couching foot meant to hold about 12 to 8 weight width yarns. Then the other foot that we're going to be using is foot number 22, and that's a 3-groove foot, and that holds our La Espiga thread very nicely. It also holds like a worsted weight yarn and things like that. So I really encourage you to be very experimental this month when you do this. Now, one fun thing that we're doing a lot of fun things this month, but one in particular that we're doing is we're actually going to be using no fabric. We're going to be doing our work on water-soluble stabilizer because at the end, we're going to have like a little mesh. We're going to see how it turns out, if we like it, if we don't like it, or whatever, because this class is always about experimentation, right? But we're also going to go into the vault, and I'm going to play a tutorial on how to do entredeux on your sewing machine, and that's done with a wing needle and the number 22 or the number 25 foot, whichever works best for you. And this one is one that we did on the 770 before they had foot recognition. So dive back into the coffers for that one, everyone. And it was a portion of our first embroidery sampler that we did all those years ago when our store first opened. So I really hope that you enjoy the techniques. And don't forget, Footloose Friday is one of these clubs. This video is free on YouTube, and you can certainly watch it as much as you want. But if you want some additional instruction, machine setup, and those type of things, then you're going to want to pay the $15 at BERNINAofNaperville.com to get our interactive handout. It's worth it because we have a lot of links to other topics, other articles, other videos that we've done to really help you master this technique. So, who's in? Let's look at that interactive handout that you get when you purchase the class. Well, like every Footloose Friday, we have our presentation deck that you can see here, and the project is different, but we kind of like to put it into these little pennants so that you can display your samples and keep your ideas kind of displayed in your sewing room. And we have a template that you can download right here and print it. And you do have to print it on 2 separate pieces of paper because it's a little bit larger than your normal printer paper. And then we're going to use that later today. And then once again, we have this YouTube video that you're watching. It's free, but in case you forget where to find it, we embed the link in your handout as well. And I wanted to make sure that you had some of these helpful tutorials, like I told you in the intro, because we have featured the couching foot before, the number 22 and the number 25 in some of our earlier videos. Bernina also has a video that you can watch, and we've also put this into some other projects. So we have sprinkled the links in here for you so that you can enjoy them again and again. So the supplies this month are pretty easy. You're going to need water-soluble aqua mesh stabilizer. You're going to interface a 4-inch by 12-inch cotton strip for the casing for our pennant. And we're going to use various threads to feed through the couching feet. We're going to use Wonderfill Razzle, an 8-weight. We're going to use Wonderfill Dazzle, an 8-weight. And then there's also Spaghetti and Fruity from Wonderfill, both in 12-weight. And we're going to be using some of the La Espiga, and this is super thick thread. It works really well through that Bernina free motion couching foot, but it also works really well in our number 22 foot. I'm using Isacord thread in a neutral color to match all of our couching thread, and I'm putting that in the bobbin as well. And then I'm even using a seam guide for left and right sides so that when I draw my lines on my water-soluble stabilizer, I have a little guide I can go off of. So I'm going to show you a video in just a few moments where I did entredeux entredeux on the machine. And for that project, you're going to need some Terreal Magic. It's like the slimy, super thick starch. You're going to need a scrap of solid cotton to give the technique a try, a wing needle, which you can see right there, and then if you want razzle or dazzle thread to enhance the entredeux. And this doesn't have anything to do with the entredeux, but you're also going to need some parchment paper from the grocery store for drying your pennant because we're sewing it on water soluble stabilizer and then we're going to dissolve it. All right, so every month I kind of give you the overview of 5.5 millimeter versus 9 millimeter on our Bernina machines, but just know that this month both feet are for any Bernina model. The couching feet number 22 and the number 25 feet, they only come in the 5.5 millimeter version. There's no coded version of this foot, and I just wanted to remind you of that. And yeah, and our inspiration this month came from this wonderful specialty threads, and there's a link to the Couched Infinity Scarf program and then also a link to Wonderful Threads. They've got a lot of good information in their Threaducation videos. All right, so let's head over to the design board and see what we're in for. This is a sample I made using a worsted weight yarn. This is Lana yarn, and I got this from a yarn shop that I love in Englewood, Florida called Bit of Yarn. And it's got like this nice little metallic in it. I used 3 strands, a special couching foot, and I'm still kind of thinking about what I want to do with this or if I want to make more. I got the idea from a video that I saw from Wonderful Threads where they couch on water soluble stabilizer. As you can see here, they're not really using the couching foot like we are, but the technique certainly will translate to your number 22 or your number 25 foot. And I just thought you might benefit from seeing how to make a little infinity scarf with this technique. I have about, I'd say, a yard of aquafilm here, 2 layers, and it's just enough to cover our pennant shape that, we make our samples for Footloose Friday. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take this aside for just a moment and I'm going to draw on it and I'm going to couch some fibers over it so that I can create our own fabric this month for our pennant instead of using any, cotton or whatever. So I pulled some threads and I pulled our supplies. So what I wanted to show you what I'm using. So of course this is Footloose Friday. So every Footloose Friday, we feature a Bernina foot. And this Friday, we are featuring the Bernina number 25 and the Bernina number 22 foot. Now, these are couching feet that are designed to hold different sizes of threads on the foot. So rather than sew with the thread in the machine, you're sewing the thread down. So number 22 is a 3-channel foot, and the 3-channel foot is what I used when I created this work because there were 3 strands of yarn in there. So we're going to use this on some of our heavier threads that I've pulled out. Then we have our number 25 foot, which does the smaller strands. And this is up to 5 strands of thread. So we can do lots of fun things with this. And I'm even going to show you a retro clip of how I did entredeux using this technique. So let's have a look at our threads. So the first thing that I pulled was our razzle. And razzle is a 8-weight thread from Wonderful, and it's 100% rayon, and it's got like this little chunky quality to it, but it's not super duper thick. So it's going to be appropriate for our number 25 foot. So we've got our razzle, and we've also got Glamour. Glamour is a little bit thinner. It's a 12-weight. This can go through our sewing machine needle as well as being couched. And then I also pulled another Glamour. And then I have a white
razzle. So there's all kinds of fun things that we can do. There's even a dazzle that you're going to see me use for our entredeux experiment, and that one has just a little bit of metallic in it. So let's pull some thread that we're going to use for our number 22 3-channel couching foot. So if worsted weight yarn isn't your jam, this La Espiga thread, which we carry here, certainly can be. And this, I'm not even sure the weight on this one is probably like a 2 or a 3, honestly. And it fits very nicely through the channels on our 22 foot here. So let's mark our water soluble stabilizer so we can get started. So basically what I want to do with this, and I'm just using a regular ballpoint Bernina of Naperville pen, and I'm going to do crisscrossy on here. So I'm just going to draw a line, and I'm only doing the one line. You could also use a water soluble pen, but this is going to work out better for you to see what I'm doing. And I'm just going at 90 degrees. All right, perfect. Then what I'm going to do, so the first thing I'm going to do is our number 25 5 groove foot. So I'm going to take this foot, and you know, all the Berninas, they have that screw on the back of them. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to add my seam guide. And these are really fun. There's a set of these. There's the right seam guide and the left seam guide like this. And it's got a ruler on it. And I'm going to line this up just to be 1 inch away from my center needle position here on my foot. And so I'm going to stitch over top of the line I drew for the first pass, but then I'm going to line my guide up like this as I go along the second pass. And once again, we're just using water soluble stabilizer.
So I'm using a Bernina 5.5 millimeter capability machine, although we can certainly do these on our 9 millimeter machines. But if you'll notice, these feet do not have any codes or anything on them, and so they can be used on every Bernina. And but they can, you know, you're not going to get a wide decorative stitch with these, is what I'm getting at. And I'm using Isocord 40 weight embroidery thread in the top and bottom. Because we're going to wash away this water soluble stabilizer, I want at least the thread to be as pretty in the top as on the back, even though we're not even going to see it that much. And the machine that I'm using today is the Bernina 735, and I'm using stitch number 4 with everything at the default setting. And stitch number 4 is a running zigzag. So that's going to make sure that it holds all of our pieces in there nicely. So I thought about my thread combinations that I'm going to do, and I want to do, it's 5 threads that are going to go through this one right here. So I'm going to do 1 white, 2 reds, and 2 black. So that means that I'm going to pull a little bit more of my red and black so that I can feed these through the channels without using like 2 spools of thread. So I'm just going to cut a couple yards of this black and red thread. And sometimes I like to cut the thread ahead of time just so that the spools aren't weighing me down. So let me do a couple more pieces of that. But you can leave them on the spools if you want. It's a personal preference. All right, so now we're going to line these guys up together. And remember, I'm going to do black, red, white. I mean, this is like a little bit more of a pink color, but you get what I'm saying here, right? So black, red, and white. And I'm going to fit it through our foot. There we go. And you're going to just kind of comb these threads through the foot like so. So we've got black, red, and white. See that? And now I'm going to take the other black and red on the other side. And so I'm just going to kind of hold these in the back, and it takes a little fiddling. And once you kind of get them together, you're going to close the door. There we go. Gently lift your threads, and let's get this under there to start stitching. And if they're not in the right order quite yet, that's okay. We're just getting started. Okay, so once you get started, you're going to kind of use the foot to comb your little threads into the right order. If you are like, this is too tricky for me or too tedious, don't worry. You can put them in any order that you want, or just let them do the thing that they want to do, which is just go into one blob, right? So let's go ahead and stitch. And then as you're stitching, just, kind of get them to behave themselves every once in a while. And you can see back there how they're looking. Looks pretty good to me. I'm probably going to get less picky as we go down this piece here. But so far, so good. Everything's good. Okay. And you know what a fun thing is? If your lines aren't perfectly straight, it doesn't matter, because they'll be perfectly straight when you wash this, because we're going to wash this after we make our grid. Okay, that's looking really good, I think. So now I'm just going to hop over to our next spot here rather than cutting my threads. All right, so there's two. And my yarn got a little bit off, so I wanted to show you what that looks like. See that? Where my red started migrating over together. But at the end of the day, this is not going to be a huge problem, because when this is washed and everything, it's going to look cool. So you can also see how this could possibly be a nice trim. Now, we don't have to sew this on water-soluble stabilizer. We can sew this on fabric or around a pre-existing garment or whatever, whatever makes you happy, makes me happy. Okay, so I'm just going to keep repeating this process until my entire piece is full. So the magic of video, boom, we'll have done all our crisscrossing. So I wanted to show you something I did. After I went all in one direction, I decided, let me save a little bit of time. So I took my template and traced it, so when I go this way, I can get through it a little bit faster. Because, speedy me. Okay, so now you can see our couch piece, but I want to add a little bit of something extra. So I'm going to take our La Espiga. This is a heavier thread, and this time I want to feed this through our number 22 3-groove foot. And all I'm going to do with this is do the perimeter right here and here of our piece to kind of hold it into shape. And that way I can then trim it up and everything's going to be good. And our zigzaggy will
hold our other little threads into position like that.
So this time I'm putting on the 3-groove foot. You can see the little channels are a little bit larger for this kind of thickness of thread. So I'm going to pull off a yard each from my La Espiga, and then I'm going to use the outline that I created of our template. I'm going to feed this through. Now I have to do this individually because this thread is a little chunky. And so I'm going to feed that one, and then this one, and then this one. And then they slip through those little channels just like so. And I'm going to start outside the line, and I'm using the same color thread and the same stitch. I'm just going to get started there to hold everything into place, and then I'm going to close the lid. But you have to be careful because if you have really heavy threads in here, you may not be able to close the lid because then things won't feed through. You can see here it's I'm getting a little bit of resistance there. Also, I've got a thread stuck, so let's fix that. Here we go. All right, here we go. Let's do it. And then I want to get that tucked under because we want to cover that. And I'm just following the lines of my pennant. Okay, now we're going to stop. Needles in the down position. Going to take a few stitches that is, and now I'm going to turn around and go this direction, following the lines on this side of the pennant. There we go. So now I want to carefully trim right close to our last couching bit with our La Espiga thread. And this is what's going to give our pennant its shape. But once I do my trimming and I leave about a ½ inch away from the top drawn line, I don't want to dissolve this yet in my water because I want to keep it with this water-soluble stabilizer on it while I put the casing on. And the casing is just a simple piece. It is 4 inches by 12 inches, and it's been interfaced with fusible woven. And I've tucked in the ends, and then I've folded it towards the center and then folded it in half again so that the folded measurement is about 11 inches by 1 inch. And then I'm going to use my edge stitch foot to just top stitch this into place, and then I'll give my piece a bath and lay it to dry on my parchment paper. Now, while that happens, why don't we have a look at a little segment from our embroidery sampler block 10 from our original embroidery sampler and see how to make entredeux on your machine. I've taken the 2 inches by 10 inch strips in preparation for my entredeux, and I'm doing this while my design stitches out. This is Terreal Magic. This is more than just spray starch. This is something that will turn fabric into a stiff, papery kind of substance. I'm also using the silicone protection that came with my Teflon piece that I use when I iron fusible web on my iron. We carry both of these things at the shop. But what I wanted to do is spray this so it's nice and stiff so I can really do a nice job with my entredeux, because we do need to get a lot of starch in there. So I am just going to let this hang out and chill out and dry most of the way. Then I'm going to take my Laura Star iron and make sure that I add my sole protection on it to kind of get it the rest of the way dry. And the reason why I use the sole protector is because it's Teflon coated and it can be cleaned up much easier than the bottom of my iron. So I've taken the wing needle out of this packaging. Now it's called a hem stitch needle because traditionally that is what hem stitching is. It's doing this like little stitch that separates the fibers of the material so that it makes a hole. So you can see how this looks like a little arrowhead. I tried to get it closer. There we go. So this looks like a little arrowhead, and as it penetrates the material, it spreads it apart, making a hole. So here is my version of the entredeux necessary for this month's block. You can see that little ladder stitch that's created. That's created by stitch number 701. And then I have the Dazzle thread by Wonderfill that is held together and held in place while we do stitch number 701 with our number 25 couching foot. And basically this is the 5 groove couching foot, but we're only going to use 2 of the grooves. So the way that it goes into the foot is there's 5 grooves, so we're going to use the one just immediately to the right of center and one just immediately to the left of center. I have my wing needle limitation set, and also because I'm using a machine that doesn't have presser foot recognition, I actually told the machine that I'm using a 5.5 millimeter stitch plate, and that way I'll be able to use this stitch and all of this stuff in the most efficient way. You're going to need to use about 36 inches per 10-inch strip, like we did here, of the Dazzle thread. So to show you what this looks like on the spool, this is it here. We carry it here at BERNINA of Naperville, and this is an 8-weight thread, and the Dazzle has a little bit of metallic in with the rayon fibers. They also make this in Razzle, and that is just the rayon without the metallic fibers. And then what you're going to do is, you can see here that I've got my strips that I stiffened with the Terriol Magic, and see, I told you it was a little bit like paper. Well, indeed it is. So I know that this is a lot wider than I really need and a little bit longer, but it's something that I can use to really help guide this nice and straight, because it's important that when you stitch your entredeux that it is very straight. So when I insert my thread into the foot, I'm gonna line it up through the little slot where you can get it in the grooves. And then we need to go 1 notch, just like I said, on either side of the center dip. Then once you get it sort of where you want it, you can lower your presser foot just to kind of get everything nice and tight there. I'm going to put my needle down, actually. There we go. And now that's helping me get everything situated how I need it. So now I'm going to close my door and I'm going to get stitching. just a note concerning some tactile things you need when you're making your entredeux is I like to hold my threads just a little bit so they don't flop around so much. You don't want to go at top speed, which is something that is really difficult for me to not do. And just try to make sure that you're keeping it straight. So here's the 1-inch mark on our stitch plate. If you need to kind of keep it aligned there just to make sure you're getting a nice straight line, do that. Once you have your 4 strips together, you're going to cut your pieces 1/4 inch just from the last needle penetration in your piece. So you're going to end up having a strip that measures just about this wide. So the best way I found to trim that 1/4 inch is to use my rotary cutter and my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. If you wanted, you could also draw a line and cut with scissors. But there's our little skinny strip that you're going to put on either side of our 2 contrast pieces. So once I cut all of my strips down, I'm going to place one of these on top of one of these, sew 1/4 inch, and then I will have my lace insertion, and then ultimately we will sew this onto this piece. All right, it's time to remove our needle and put on our normal piecing needle. And then I'm also going to be lifting my foot and using my 97 foot. And now I've got my little strips to sew together. And I prefer to sew with my entredeux piece or entredeux on top. So I'm just going to line this up. Now these are going to be trimmed down, so don't worry if there's like a mess at the top and bottom. We're going to trim them down because our piece is ultimately less than 10 inches high. So I'm going to lower my presser foot. And now we're going to stitch. Oops, but don't forget to change back to a straight stitch. Pro tip. So now we can see how good that looks. And now we're going to sew another strip onto the other side. Quarter-inch seams. And then finally, one of the discarded pieces. And I'm just going to flip it over so I can sew with the entredeux on top. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And hey, we're going to have another Footloose Friday next month, and that topic is going to be the Spanish hemstitch attachment. I think you're going to like that one a lot because there's so many fun things that we can do with it. And we're going to make something really interesting that also involves a serger. So until next time, have fun experimenting, and remember, we have tons of other videos that you can peruse as well on our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy to find. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Happy creating.